Hello and welcome. You're tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness, and we're going to give a quick shout out to HelloFresh. They're sponsoring our show all week. HelloFresh is a meal kit delivery service that shops, plans, and delivers your favorite step-by-step recipes and pre-measured ingredients so you can just cook, eat, and enjoy. Thanks, HelloFresh. And for $30 off your first week of HelloFresh, visit HelloFresh.com and enter code Darkness30 at checkout. That's HelloFresh.com and then enter Darkness30 at checkout. You'll save $30 off that first week of HelloFresh. Tonight we're going to take an interesting jaunt down a different line here. We talk about so many different aspects of the paranormal, and there has been a lot, as we've noticed with the listeners, when we start dealing into the world of the cryptids. You guys love it. You download the shows more than any other episodes we do, and we're fascinated by people's interest in cryptid creatures. Why is there such a fascination with this? Something that you would think science would have proven by now, especially in most cases of these bipedal giant hairy hominids. You would think there would be something more substantial out there, real fur tufts, real imprints, something that we can actually prove to science that these creatures exist. But here we stand, 2017, 50 years after 2018, 51 years now after the Patterson-Gimlin film, and I don't know that we're really any further along. Is that because of the way TV handles these cases, the way that news reports it with tongue-in-cheek comments and silly antics? What's really going on out there? Well, we wanted to talk to Scott Marlowe, and Scott has been proclaimed as America's most credible cryptozoologist. He spends as much time in camos and boots as he does in a lab coat in Oxford's. He's back with us on the show tonight to talk to us a little bit about this and share some insights and maybe some stories of what's been going on in the world. Scott, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Let's start talking about the issues going on with kind of this current crop of cryptid-related television programming that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years. What, in your opinion, are the real concerns about these kind of shows?
Well, I've seen the shows evolve from informational shows, like, go back quite a ways, go back to Leonard Nimoy and In Search Of. And of course, I was involved with Monster Quest, which was, in my opinion, a great show. But what's happening now is, because of some of the issues that we probably should talk a little bit about tonight, they are turning more and more towards entertainment shows than they are any kind of programming that gives you any real sense of what's actually going on out there in the field. And they're strictly entertainment. They're satire or any number of other things where the so-called sightings and encounter events are manufactured, and it's just not reality television, even though it's being sold that way.
Well, and I think if you talk to the guys behind the show Finding Bigfoot, they'd say something different and have a different perspective on it. But of course, we know entertainment sells, and how do you keep drawing people in week after week on a show unless you've got big characters, kind of silly things, and weirdness, high weirdness going on?
Well, they've got an agenda, and that's fine. I understand that. I mean, how many people would tune in if it was called Not Finding Bigfoot?
Well, I think that's what it's kind of become known as at this point in its game. There's been a lot of hijinks, and some of the shows are fun to watch because of the personalities and the characters behind them. But you don't see real science stepping up in most, or if any, in these kind of programming choices to delve into the reality of what are the possibilities that something like these creatures do exist.
Well, there's good possibilities. I mean, the purists who expect, and their expectation is that Bigfoot has got to be a certain type of creature, i.e. a bipedal, hairy, undiscovered primate, yada, yada, yada. Okay, that's a general description. That's fine. You want to call that Bigfoot. That's terrific. But there are differences between Bigfoot creatures, although we shouldn't talk only about them tonight either. If you look at a Sasquatch, it's different from the Florida swamp ape in many ways that would make it a different type of creature or a different species or genera thereof. If you go to Africa, there's different variations on the theme. Some of it can be height, some of it can be foot anatomy, some of it can be the way they present themselves or how they behave. They're not exactly the same, except the commonality of they're usually fairly large, although not always. They're hairy, they're bipedal, and they appear to be some kind of primate, although we're not sure of that because no one's actually captured one to bring it in North America. But that said, it has happened in Africa. A Bigfoot has been discovered. They didn't call it Bigfoot because that wasn't its African name, but it was identified, and its remains had been sitting on a shelf at a museum in the Congo, misidentified as a different kind of gorilla, which it wasn't, for over 100 years before somebody actually realized what it really was. And then you had Shelley Williams from Atlanta and Carl Annan, who was a photographer, who got out there and documented the thing. And finally they got a sample of material. Henry Dorley Zoo did the DNA on it, and it turned out that it was a variant of a pantroglodyte, i.e. chimpanzee, that happened to be larger than a gorilla with a chimpanzee's face. And it walks, because it lives in a swamp, walks pretty much on two legs all of the time.
Now, how old was this specimen?
The skeletal remains were over 100 years old. It had been misidentified as a different kind of gorilla. But before they re-examined it and realized what it really was. But only recently, in 2004, was one actually captured and documented as being what it is. So, but everybody immediately, because we know all about pantroglodytes, chimps, immediately dismissed it as being inconsequential to the cryptid community, and a cryptozoologist really didn't find it, yada, yada, yada. So, you get all the cynics and all of their stupid shit on it, pardon my French, because it didn't fit their expectation of what a Bigfoot has to be.
All right, but if it has been categorized,
yeah,
and
then it's no longer a cryptid.
Right. Science has looked into what this is. Then how, so we know it's a, and I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the title. What did you refer to it as?
Pantroglodyte swinefurthi, which is the scientific name for it.
And is that just like a ginormous chimp? Is that basically what we're looking at?
Yeah, it's a chimpanzee that's larger than a gorilla.
But are these still living and around now?
Yes, they live in the Congo.
Have there been other sightings of the living versions? Oh, really? Yes. Okay. All right.
Oh, yeah. They're still there. It's not like this was the last and only one of them. They're there. There's not many of them, like the mountain gorillas. They're endangered too, but they are there.
Well, how does that tie in then with the North American Bigfoot, Sasquatch, wild man, furry friend, whatever the hell you want to call it?
Well, there's any number of possibilities. I mean, to look at the possibilities, just do a literal translation of all the different Native American names for the animal. And it runs the entire gamut. I mean, it can be a forest friend, it can be a spirit animal, it can be a giant cannibal, it can be yada, yada, yada. There's names for these things in every Native American language, and there's hundreds of them, hundreds of names. And they all are somewhat descriptive of the traits of the animal in the particular area that tribe inhabited. So, I mean, one of the things that I have wondered about for a long time, and I've been doing research on it, and my God, thanks to the people this year that stepped up and put up some money for Pangea to conduct an expedition out west. I went out to California hoping to get a hold of some of the remains of these so-called red-haired giants from Lemlock Cave that for some inexplicable reason science, although they've had these remains since the early 20th century, has decided that they don't want to identify using DNA, which is just about as stupid as you can be. Now, they've identified.
Why not? What was the reason? I mean, they've got to be giving a reason.
They won't give a reason. And as a matter of fact, on the occasions that I've attempted to get DNA, because that's what I went out there expressly for, I've been denied access to them by the Bureau of Land Management. Even the museums who wanted to cooperate with me were cut short by the BLM and would not let me near them. They wouldn't even let me see them, even though I knew the bin numbers, the specimen numbers, and everything else going out to the museum. Now, why is that?
Well, is that something that's part of the Public Information Act? Is that something that you should be allowed to see, or would there be a reason behind it?
That's a science issue. They're doing it on all kinds of remains of all kinds of Native American peoples, even though there's all sorts of fights going on with the Native American Repatriation Act, which is part of the problem here. But that, the Spirit Cave, they just recently skeleton, they just recently did DNA on, and they found out that it was closely related to the Native American tribes, which is what you would expect. But that may not be the case on all of these things. There is increasing amount of evidence that the so-called giants, which, by the way, the Paiutes and other tribes out that way identified as Bigfoot. They may have migrated. They may have migrated north into the North American continent from South America because they're not as squeamish about doing the DNA down there, and they've discovered that there are certain tribes that have the same kind of characteristics as our Lovelock giants that had Melanesian origins, i.e., coming from the islands around Australia.
So then we're not talking so much about creatures; we're just talking more about indigenous hominid beings.
The problem with cryptozoology being labeled a paranormal science is that is not entirely true. It is actually a real science that seeks to identify and resolve undiscovered or unknown primates or other animals, any other animal life that is legendary, is said to exist but has not been proven yet by science. Now, that it originally was conceived as a branch of zoology, but it's actually evolved because of the forensics and other things needed to do this kind of work. It's really evolved into its own kind of science. But because there isn't any PhD program out there that you can stick after your name, nobody takes it seriously.
Okay, now you've talked about a couple of findings like that. That gives us some hope in the field that there is proof that exists, that we're not that far removed from being able to find something to prove that there are other creatures or beings that have been here that are still being held, the science is being held back from us.
Yes.
With that said, there's enough money that it should loosen up anything. Why do you believe the government would need to hide something like giants or some type of two-legged great ape that would be roaming the earth? What's in the benefit for them?
Here we get into the conspiracy theory stuff. The government doesn't want us and keeps a tight rein on information they don't want out there for whatever their reasons. Now, it could be religious-based because if we find out that there's another kind of human species roaming around on the planet, what does that do to the religious backgrounds or the religious movements? It could be land ownership issues. It could be there's any number of reasons why they don't want us to know these facts. But slowly, and of course science works very slowly, it's supposed to. For those people who think it should, go ahead at light speed, that's ridiculous. But, for example, my statement that these red-haired giants may not be the kind of creature or human creature we expect of them, and that that modern dogma has indicated has to be because they came across the Beringia land bridge, yada yada yada. It was one migration, which isn't true. People have built their life work on all of these ridiculous assumptions, which should not have happened. They have just found a human skeleton of an infant up in Alaska that they did the DNA on, and lo and behold, it is an unknown human species from Asia that is not related to the Native American Indian.
And once they find that, what are their findings? What kind of research papers do they release on that, and how do they start to connect that?
Here's a political issue. All right, then you're going to get into who got here first. And if it turns out that there was another type of human species that got here first, and the Native American tribes came in after that and displaced them, doesn't their political clout kind of go out the window because they're always telling us that we came here and replaced them?
I get that, but it just depends on where their place in time and history was. And if their breed died off earlier, I mean, that would be part of it.
Well, yeah, but if you look at the supposed history of these red-haired giants, they were burned out of existence by the Paiutes.
Okay, and I get that, but then we're starting to look at then what was the culture like back then, and were they aggressive towards the Paiutes? Was there some kind of territorial issue? Because there's been no hidden agenda behind the fact that there were Native American tribes that did not get along well and battled each other as well.
Well, we know that.
Right.
We know that. But we know there was a considerable culture based on the things found in the Lovelock Cave and elsewhere, that these people from the Great Basin were fairly well and extremely sophisticated. You know, they were hunters. They lived on tool rafts out on a lake, made out of a kind of swamp grass or a reed grass. They knew how to hunt. They knew how to fish. They were said to be cannibals, but we don't know that that's a fact. That could be myth. We were told they were giants, and from what I've seen thus far, there's no evidence that that's true. They were the same size as everybody else, but they had a few members of their community that were of rather large stature.
Now, there are Native American tribes that refer to these tall, Bigfoot-like creatures and say that they still exist, that they are around, but they're nothing more than just another tribe.
Well, and again, that may be true, but maybe they're the Bigfoot we're looking at.
Very well could be. I understand. Now, how come we're not, when you have Native American cultures that are willing to come forward and talk about some of these aspects, and they point the finger to what they believe are the culprits or who they believe are the culprits, why can't we can find the Native Americans, why can't we find these beings?
Because for some reason or another, they have learned that it is best not to interact with us.
They're pretty lackadaisical. I mean, they're being cited. Being cited all the time.
Well,
they're just lucky that they haven't.
And most of the credible sightings are out in places where ordinary people don't want to go.
Right. But you've also got a lot of police that have seen them cross roads.
Sure.
Right? You've got
truckers.
Military and truckers and things like that. And it's really kind of astounding to me at this point in history that nobody's hit them with all the damn cars on the highway and put one down.
Let me say this, and I'm sure there are stories here in Florida where that's happened to the swamp ape, but the bodies keep disappearing.
Right.
Again, why? These giants have been found all over America. Read the ancient newspapers. Go to the morgues of almost every newspaper in every community. You'll find somebody came up against a skeleton, a giant that was gigantic and out of proportion and yada, 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 or very strange. It was sent off to the Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian categorically denies they've got anything. Why?
I don't know. That's where we're all on.
The newspapers could lie, yeah, but not so many of them.
So when I know the Smithsonian has popped up from time to time over the years when we've talked about this, and they've talked about how the Smithsonian has covered up the giants and so on. What line of proof do we have that they have been sent things and that there's, somebody had to have taken photographs of what was found and what was sent and
you've got
documentation. Right.
And there are affidavits, and I have people who have worked with me that were interns at the Smithsonian, even had bin numbers in their ossuary that these things were in, and I've called to inquire, and oh no, that doesn't exist. I mean, it's almost as though they're prepared for my phone call.
Yeah,
it's not I have to look. It's oh no, they don't exist.
Yeah. I just can't believe,
that I
seriously.
Can understand too.
Right. So it just seems so hard to me at this point, though, that there's, I can't wrap my head around the whole idea of what the reasoning is to hide it. We're a pretty different world at this point. This isn't some backwards provincial Puritans that only want to believe that there's only one race. Obviously, we see there are multiple races, multiple beliefs, multiple religions, and so on that coexist, and yet we're still able to survive and not blow the world up.
Well, with regard to the giants, I can understand that because, one step away from declaring these giant creatures, whatever they were, Nephilim, and then turning it into a religious free-for-all by all the religious nuts is one of the things that I have no doubt the government fears beyond belief.
But most of the people that are going to be most upset are the ones that are Bible-banging religious scholars and believers anyway. And there are mentions of these beings in the Bible and throughout history. So I would think that would only benefit and corroborate the histories that we've been given.
To a point, yes. But when they start giving them supernatural and paranormal attributions and traits, then it becomes a problem because there's no way to know that. There's no way to verify that any of that was true. Yeah, there may have been giants, no big deal. We know that. I mean, take a look at Wadlow. I can go up to the museum in Philadelphia and see his skeleton at any time, and sure, he was a very tall guy. There's tall people like that in China right now today, but and elsewhere in the world, but they're not Nephilim.
Okay, and I understand they're not the Nephilim, but they fit the kind of agenda and propaganda that's already been cited out there.
But again, somebody's imposing their expectations on something with no scientific proof whatsoever that their jump of conclusion is correct.
So where does that leave us then? Where do we go that we're going to start putting this together and get legitimate groupings of scientific data? These things seem to be smarter than us. Even if we put together if your group, the Pangea Institute, was given $100,000 to go out and grid this area for the next 3 weeks and be out there, and you had professional trackers and military and law enforcement and hot equipment, what do you believe the chances would be you would legitimately, in a 3 to 4 week span, be able to bring back some kind of conclusive evidence to the existence of these beings?
How long do you think it took Dion Fossey to acclimate herself to the gorillas before they would show themselves to her?
Oh, I'm sure. Forever. It took, months upon months before they would start to allow her in there.
You think that's going to happen in 4 weeks? Not a chance in hell.
No, but that's one person. This is an aggressive grouping of people that would go out there and find it. I think that's the problem is people want immediate response.
Any self-respecting animal with the level of intelligence they appear to have would head for the hills.
I couldn't agree more. And if you're one of those level-headed animals looking to head to the hills, but you want a nice, affordable vehicle, and you're looking to buy a car, then you're probably familiar with terms like MSRP, but you don't know what it stands for. What does it actually mean? Well, the same goes for invoice, list price, and dealer price. It's enough to confuse anybody. All you're really looking for is a price that actually means something. And that's what they're introducing through True Price from TrueCar. Now you can know exactly what you'll pay for the car you want, including fees and accessories, before you even get to the dealership. True car dealers will show you the true price on cars like the one you want, all from the comfort of your home. And how do you know if your true price is a great price? Because TrueCar shows you what other people paid for the same car you want. And your certified dealers know this, so they set their true price competitively so they can win your business. So when you're ready to buy new or a previously owned car, visit TrueCar and enjoy a more confident car buying experience. Some features are not available in all states. All right, Scott. I love
nice segue.
Well, you got to do what you got to do in the biz.
Yeah.
This is always so interesting, right? I mean, it's a polarizing issue for a lot of people, and I don't know where I come down. I've seen things, I've heard things, I know people that I trust and like considerably, and they tell me of encounters with these creatures. And then on the other hand, I look at what science has listed out and shown, and I look at the probabilities of something having been caught or captured by now, even by accident, and it just seems overwhelming. What keeps your drive and passion in this field, especially when you see a glut of the different programmings, killing Bigfoot, finding Bigfoot, shooting Bigfoot, befriending Bigfoot, all the different shows, like that pop up where the sole purpose is to get entertainment, bring it in. I mean, truthfully, the series would be over in a week if they caught him in the first episode. So it's pretty safe to assume, the TV programming minds behind it don't really feel they're going to go out there and locate anything immediately because that would kill the series. But
as I said, Bigfoot's only one.
Right.
One aspect of cryptozoology. And it's really not that it's the most popular, it gets the most press, but it's not really the most important. It's something that's going to happen when it happens, not because somebody wants it to happen and tries to will it into existence. I mean, it's almost ridiculous. I'm out there preaching Jurassic Park from the original movie and playing Jeff Goldblum's part, day after day after day. Just because you want it to happen doesn't mean it's going to. These animals are not going to show up on cue. It is not a Disney movie. So, you want that kind of thing, go to Disney World. But if you go out in the woods, expect to be disappointed.
Right, and that's what I think most people are going to have is spending that kind of time and quality time out there. They're not going to find what they're really looking for on an immediate deal. But what is the passion that keeps you moving forward in this?
Exactly that. First of all, I feel I have a responsibility to the public, at least the public that I appeal to point out the hoaxes, the hoaxers, and keep everybody honest. And on the other angle, my own personal thing is I want to know something that other people don't know, and then make it known. That I'm not doing that because I want fame or fortune. I just like knowing things. And I know. And
what do you do? I mean, what are you calling out? If we put your feet to the fire right now and you look at the things, aside from the Tom Biscardis, who are obvious hoaxers and fakes and charlatans out there, what are you looking to expose, and what do you feel that you can really expose and say without a doubt this group or this team or this show is nothing but a scam?
Well, a good example right now. This was going around social media forever. Todd Standing just did a program. That he produced and did the video on. And there were people discussing the creature as seen in the video, which of course is always out of focus. And even when you get a clear shot, it's, there's foliage or something in the way, so you can't see it all. And one of the things that struck me is that based on what I could see, I couldn't tell whether the animal was real, because I'm not calling Todd a hoaxer. I'm just saying this is a possibility. And some of the prosthetic makeup that is very inexpensive and extremely easy to use to somebody that knows how to do so, that is available out there off the shelf, not, in Stan Winston's lab, but off the shelf from companies like mostlydead.com. I mean, you just buy these latex appliances and you glue them on, whatever your character is going to be with spirit gum, and you paint and decorate it with, classic, camera makeup or Hollywood makeup. You can even buy synthetic hair that you can put in place. And some of the photos that were floating around that I didn't do, but other people now are getting pretty smart and did, showed a progression from Todd's face to the face shown in the video. And to me, it looked like he had makeup on. This kind of prosthetic makeup.
So why are people doing this? Is it just to cash in to get the attention, do you think?
I mean, they do it for all kinds of different reasons. Some people do it for money. Some people do it because they have, shall we say, a damaged ego, and it makes them feel good when they can fool a lot of people because they can say, I'm smarter than you. And some are just plain sociopaths who get off on doing this kind of thing to defraud and defame other people.
And do you think some of them are getting caught up in wanting to prove their point so much that they'll go to these links in hopes that it's going to garner enough attention to get science or a funding behind them to prove
I doubt
the reality?
Very serious that science or funding has anything to do with their antics.
That's what I'm asking you. I don't know what, I don't know if you're thinking that, in some cases I've seen some good people I know in the paranormal that I fully believe in ghosts and the paranormal. And I've seen them do a few things on the side that start to make me question their, are they trying to just get more awareness and attention into the field, and that's why they're going to do something like this? Or are they doing it simply so they can try to cash in, as a celebrity?
As I said, there's any number of reasons. Why did creationists go to where the dinosaur tracks are in Glen Rose, Texas, and carve human footprints next to the dinosaur tracks? because they were hell-bent and determined to prove that humans and dinosaurs coexisted and lived 6,000 years ago, because that's what their dogma says. That's not what science says. That's what their dogma says, and they are hell-bent and determined that they're going to prove it. Well, that doesn't help. That doesn't prove anything. It just it completely takes away from your argument. How does perpetrating a hoax help you in any conceivable way to gain credibility?
Oh, I don't think it does, but I think some people mistake it for that. They're doing what they can do, they feel, to try to get the attention back towards the thing. And we've seen that in many different cases in the ghost claims. So, when the patience and the entertainment value starts to wear off, they do something to really kind of gather more attention. And that's, even looking back at things like, the Enfield poltergeist case was pretty well known for that. So you've got that kind of aspect of history where people try to do things to just keep relevant. We've got to take a break. We're up against a break here. We'll come back. We've got more with Scott Marlowe. We'll find out more of what's going on in the world out there. What are some of the more recent sightings, and what can we do to just start putting more people's feet to the fire to get the credibility up there, to get the idea and the knowledge that the things that we are being told is legitimate. And why do guys like Tom Biscardi, who continually pull the wool over your eyes, tell you they're going to be back and do it again, and they come back and do it again, and good people throw good money after more to be a part of it? It's confounding. We'll talk about that when we return. You're listening to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness.
Hi, this is Ben Domenech, the host of the Federalist Radio Hour. We're a daily show coming to you 5 days a week from Washington, D.C., where we interview our nation's top journalists, politicians, authors, chefs, economists, entertainers, and more. If you're looking for a contrarian discussion on news, politics, or culture, give us a listen and subscribe at podcastone.com, the new Podcast One app, or at Apple Podcasts.
Hey, this is Chris Jericho inviting you to the first ever rock and wrestling Rager at Sea. Picture this: rock and roll, wrestling, comedy, live podcasting, all on the open ocean from October 27th to the 31st, 2018, from Miami to Nassau. I'm bringing Hall of Fame wrestlers, some of the greatest rock and roll bands on the planet, and putting the first wrestling ring on a cruise ship ever. Don't be a stupid idiot. Make the list. Check us out at ChrisJerichoCruise.com.
Beyond the Darkness.
We're back. This is Beyond the Darkness, your home for the best in paranormal talk radio, monsters or myths. We're talking about some of the hucksters, the hoaxsters, and the reality of the cryptid universe. What are the TV shows and current programming doing to this field? And Scott Marlowe, as you can tell, is very passionate about all aspects of this. I want to get into a couple different deals, and I want to talk a little bit about these flying creatures that everybody is witnessing now. But one thing I know we spoke about off air you wanted to discuss and you thought was important is how people, how'd you put it, how people see things that aren't really there.
Well, there's a number of different ways. Of course, there are psychological causes that I don't really want to get too deeply into that can make people see or hear things that aren't there. And after a while, you can kind of recognize these people, because the easiest way to reveal who they are and that they have a problem is to challenge the delusion of a delusional person. They become very agitated, very violent. They don't calmly express themselves. They get highly defensive. So it's pretty easy to spot them. Others are a little more subtle. And frankly, now let me say, I'm not pointing fingers or saying they're in error or there's a problem there per se, other than what we're hearing from them is not factual. These people really honestly believe what they think they're seeing, but they're not necessarily seeing what they think they are. For example, I mean, look at the painkiller epidemic we got going on right now. And they are opiate-driven, are they not?
Yes, that's correct.
How many people out there really know that one of the common side effects of opiates is hallucinations and delusions?
I do. But that's because I've had to deal with them because of the pains and surgeries I've had. So, yeah, I understand some of the side effects, sure.
Sure. So a lot of the people out there hearing Bigfoot voices and communication and speech, that's an hallucination. And it very likely that's exactly what's happening. That's why when you ask them to step forward with a recording, they never can. Because it isn't real.
Okay.
All right, if it were real, they could capture it on tape.
But there are people that claim to have captured voices, the kind of samurai chatter, the whoops and hollers and screams. Again, not being an outdoorsman, there's a lot of it that sounds like natural animals to me that I've heard in the zoo, but, then the answer is always, well, that's because they mimic the animals that they hear as well. Does that get frustrating for you that's like, God, stop
sure.
the BS excuses? No, it's a mountain lion. It's a coyote. It's not a Bigfoot pretending to be a mountain lion or a coyote.
Exactly. And, I mean, there are ways of being able to tell that if you're familiar with the kinds of sounds you're dealing with. So to a total novice who doesn't know any better and hears somebody talking in the woods, well, what do you think? I've had people who are even knowledgeable send me tapes and ask me what this is and what I thought it was, and it turns out that it's a particular sound that a blue heron can make. It doesn't do it often, but it does it. Coyotes have an amazing range of sound, as do wolves. And some cats can make, I've got a cat that if you sit here and you listen to him and you ask him a question, he can go, no. And he knows he's saying no.
Yeah, now that I've heard. I have a couple of cats that I've heard out loud talk. It's really unnerving.
It can be very unnerving. Sometimes, I've got one cat that's such a narcissist, he admires himself in the mirror. But, the bottom line is that they can do human-like things. People don't think of them that way because, they're just pets, they're animals, they can't do anything humans can do. Bull cookies, cow chips. That's not true. Animals are very smart. All animals are very smart. So we don't give them credit where the credit is due. And of course there are other types of drugs that might be prescribed to people for a variety of personality disorders that also are very well known to produce hallucinations and delusions. But the people experiencing them usually don't realize that's what's happening, simply because they're not aware of the effects that those drugs can have on them. And sometimes I'll get into a major row, as I'm sure you've noticed on Facebook from time to time. And as I draw somebody out with more and more questions, as we get down to the nitty-gritty, it comes out that, I'm taking an opiate.
Yeah, and I've encountered people like that as well, and you start to dig a little deeper to find that out. And there's, for the record too, there's a lot of other things that are not opiates that, Monster energy drinks and some of these that have such high levels and doses of caffeine. Some of the side effects are visual disturbances and hallucinations. If you look into high doses of caffeine, nicotine can produce the exact same thing. So you got people out there smoking cigarettes, chugging coffee or energy drinks, and they could be allowing themselves to be witnessing all kinds of false phenomena that appears real.
Well, even alcohol poisoning, which happens to be a very popular pastime in the woods, could do that, because look at the number of people that fall for these pareidolia issues, where a shadow or face among the leaves is something that our minds do naturally with the programming that we have for defense mechanisms as animals, because we are. That's a carryover from when we were cave people, if you will, or hunter-gatherers. So because we have to be aware of what's going on around us, and our mind imprints that type of thing. So all of a sudden, a light comes up that shouldn't be there, or some other type of thing happens to cause a light and shadow effect, and everybody freaks out. I just saw a Bigfoot. I've seen police do that. Trained police do that, knowing full well there's nothing there myself. and they go off the deep end and start trying to run home to mama.
What are we doing, and what kind of things are in play right now to hold more of the quote-unquote investigators' feet to the fire regarding all of these false claims and stories that are being put out there? I mean, it doesn't seem like it's being policed so well, and unfortunately, much like the cryptid and the paranormal and ufology fields, everybody's so bitchy and catty, it's damn impossible to know who's really telling the truth and who's not. Everybody's got an agenda and some kind of skin in the game to become famous, and they will belittle and batter and diminish anybody else's accomplishments.
Well, every first-year psychology student knows that you're going to get into those types of arguments if you try to challenge the delusion of a delusional. And so you can't let that bother you, and you just got to keep trying to do it. And those that are intelligent will stop and think and listen to what you have to say and analyze with some kind of rational thought. Others are, Bigfoot particularly has become a freaking religion. God help you if you challenge the religion. And it's silly. I make a distinction between a skeptic, because a scientist should be a skeptic, and a cynic, which won't believe anything. They're always negative. Everything they have to say and everything they do is negative. So the cynics I got a problem with. The skeptics I have no problem with at all.
Well, I don't have problems with the cynics anymore, because there's so many of the people out there doing stupid stuff that it's kind of shot all of us in the foot.
Well, yes, exactly. And
so the cynics has the
letting
problem,
this
right?
stuff go uncontrolled. Therein lies the danger of those TV shows. Therein lies the problem.
I agree. Now, talk to me about this spate of flying humanoid creatures that are being seen. Not just, Illinois has certainly been a hotbed, but there are quite a few states where they've seen these creatures, everything from pterodactyls to these large moth or bat-like creatures. What do you make of what's going on currently?
Well, there is something going on. Whatever it is and whatever they're seeing, I don't know. This is not a new phenomenon. This has been going on, and it seems to happen in fits and spurts all over the world. In Cornwall, England, they've had the Owl Man, the Mothman legend from Point Pleasant. Ken Gerhardt has documented, I can't tell you how many down in his area, San Antonio. It's going on, as you mentioned, up in Illinois. There's flying creatures being seen in Africa. And I had one about 3-4 years ago. Somebody asked me to look into a case down here in Florida in a little town up on 27 called Old Town, which I did. And I couldn't find much evidence, and I couldn't find a whole lot of witnesses to the creature itself, but people who knew the story. And I assembled it all, and actually we're now making a movie about this particular thing because it's a pretty interesting tale. But in any event, these things are being seen all over the place, and I'm not so sure that they can be so easily dismissed as an owl or a large bat. I don't know what they are.
Now, these type of things have been around for years and centuries as well, through many different belief systems on this. When you start to go out to investigate claims like this, Scott, what's the first line of defense? What do you do to start putting down that perimeter to make sure that this is a legitimate claim and you're not just dealing with goofballs trying to waste your time?
Well, the first thing you do is you go out and you interview the eyewitnesses in depth, and usually several times. And you get all the information together, and you look for commonalities and differences, and then you start researching them.
And once you start to kind of sift through that, how do you tell? I've talked to some very convincing people who later on you find out are so full of shit on so many levels, but man, they are such sincerely full of shit that it's almost impossible to tell when they're on and when they're off.
And a good example of that is the lizard man sightings down in Northport, Florida. Total hoax. And they had
all right. Talk us through those. When did that supposedly start up, and what was going on?
That goes back about 10 to a dozen years ago, and somebody kept reporting these lizard people that were roaming around their backyard and all over Northport, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it was just a guy looking for attention and let's call it a challenged son or foster child that was living with him that he conned into seeing what wasn't there. And, it became a big news item. And I wrote about that particular event in my, let's see, which book did I put that in? I think I put that in my Cryptid Creatures book.
Now, do you believe that there are real dangers to people that are watching the entertainment focused shows on cryptids?
Oh, yeah.
And I'll outline some of those for me.
Well, one of them that worries me, and it's not just the cryptid shows that get this going, is people want to get some proof about some of these cryptid animals. We'll go back to Bigfoot, as much as I hate to go back on that subject. But any living animal that has bare skin easily leaves DNA evidence behind when it touches something, particularly a smooth surface, even a surface that is not smooth. And there are certain chemical reagents that they whip out on these CSI crime shows like luminol, and they spray it all over the place. Then they produce a black light, and it glows. Well, that's true. Luminol will do that. The problem is that luminol, not the luminol itself, but the suspension that you put it in, is like breathing dry cleaning fluid. Somebody's going to get hurt because they don't know how to handle the product. And you don't spray it on while you're in your street clothes. You spray it on while you're in a biosuit because of these types of dangers. And I've heard people talking about this stuff because I started using it ages ago, but properly. And I've actually left the luminol in favor of something else called Blue Star Forensic because it's a little safer.
Well, what do you use? Talk to me about the use of luminol in cryptid investigations. That's new to me. I've heard it in paranormal investigations to try to prove or disprove that there was a death on site, but not with cryptids.
Well, the skin oils that you have in your hands, the rest of your body, when you rub up against something or touch it, will leave DNA residue behind. And luminol is pretty good also for resolving blood. If there's any blood left at all anywhere, the luminol will show it, even if you've tried to clean it off. So that's a useful product for that. But, of course, one of the other issues with luminol is it destroys the DNA, so any possible DNA testing you do is going to be rendered invalid on the samples that you retrieve, whereas Blue Star, that's not a problem. But and then there's an anhydrine that you can use on not a smooth surface but a porous surface that'll pretty much do the same thing. So there are different chemical reagents that you can use in forensics that will help you find and uncover different types of biological evidence depending upon what you're dealing with. I mean, there's some really good low-tech solutions to this, too. I mean, I've had people say that, Bigfoot is raiding a barrel out in the back that he has to take a lid off of that's a smooth metal thing because it's like a drum, and they leave fingerprints all the time, but I can't capture the fingerprints. Well, bring out the Pam and dust it with some flour, dear. And then when he touches it, he's going to leave the fingerprints behind, which you can pick up using clear contact paper or some kind of tape.
See, now that's fascinating insight. I wish they would do. I think people would be just as fascinated watching those aspects on a show like this regarding the cryptid realm into how to do that and how to do it safely.
And there you go. That's what the shows should be doing.
All right.
That's the kind of stuff they should be doing, not saying, I saw a Bigfoot over there in the shadow.
Right. Well, unfortunately, they are a bit elusive, right? So sometimes that's all you can deal with is the subjective nature of people's eyewitness accounts.
Yes, but you have to start somewhere. And even though anecdotal evidence is useless as proof, it's a good starting place for science. Based on the stories, once you've collected enough information, you can start creating a hypothesis and then go test it. And if the hypothesis holds up, you make some more assumptions based on it because it's somewhat reliable until you prove the hypothesis is useless. And then you have to make new assumptions, and you go out and you test the new assumption. That's why science works so slowly, because everything starts with assumptions that have to be shown as holding up over time under all conditions.
When you've dealt with, and I know many have reached out to you, they have to have television producers. What has been their biggest failing when they're reaching out to try to get you to work with them or entice you to be a part of their show?
The biggest problem that I have had personally is television producers who have absolutely zero understanding of the subject they're trying to present.
And that's the biggest failing that you're seeing so far? That's
the biggest problem. The other is, of course, we go back to the Jeff Goldblum thing on Jurassic Park. I mean, these animals don't simply show up because you're there with a camera and say, "Here I am." Mm-hmm. So by the time you've had a sighting and somebody dispatches a crew and you get a show together and do everything that you need to do, that creature's long gone. So what are you left with? You know, you're left with relatively boring stuff that people don't really want to watch. So they try to goose it up with reenactments and stuff like that, which is all fine, but it's not real.
And what do you make of the reenactments? I mean, again, it's compelling TV watching. You do get that aspect of it, right? I mean, you do understand the need for that to draw people in, to give them something to connect to in hopes of seeing or finding more science for that, right?
Sure, but I mean, the problem is the yardstick that I have come to use to gauge the effectiveness and the viability of the different shows is Monster Quest, which in my opinion was the very best cryptid show that has ever been done. You know, kudos to Doug Hychek. And they even found a few cryptids. We even solved a few cryptid riddles with that show. A good example is the one I did with Ed Patuk on the sea monster, that's in quotes, that was down in Lake Worth in Palm Beach. Ed and I were right on target. We didn't identify the species correctly, but we did identify the genus of the animals involved, and we're absolutely right. And you can't believe the hate mail we got until a year later when a news crew flew overhead and found the animal we said it had to be. Or should I say animals, because there were literally two involved that were being composited into one animal. There were just two different animals swimming together, and when one would surface and then the tail would surface and yada, yada, yada. And so you were seeing a manatee with a damaged tail and a sea lion.
Oh, so you just had two that were living close to one another, and you were picking up remnants of both in the video kind of thing.
One was a carnivore.
Right.
One was an herbivore. They didn't compete for food, so there was no reason that they couldn't associate.
Right.
And they follow each other back and forth using the Gulf Stream, because we know that our manatees go up as far as Lake Champlain. They've been documented up there. And the seals are there too, and they come back. They just follow the manatees. So this has been going on, and since the apparent extinction of the monk seal down here, as there were seals in Florida at one time, they supposedly are now extinct. You've got a void in nature's niches down here that these seals can now adapt to and stay down here.
I like the fact that you're looking at the true aspects of it, which I think a lot of people want to remove. I mean, let's face it, TV doesn't really want the gloss and the real science. They want the maybes, the perhaps, the smoke and mirrors of it could have been a manatee, but then again, maybe it really was the Lake Champlain monster, right? I mean, they have to leave it with that.
Here's where the misconception comes in. As a cryptozoologist, you're a monster hunter.
Mm-hmm.
No, I'm not. That's not my job. That might happen in the confines of what I do for a living, but my job is to answer questions about animals that people can't identify. Sometimes we get lucky enough to be able to attribute a sighting of a quote cryptid, and where it turns out to be an animal that's well known to science, it's just not where it belongs, and that's true in 90% of the cases. Only 10% of the cases really are some kind of animal nobody knows anything about, and that could be for any number of reasons.
All right,
it could be a newly generated species.
Mm-hmm.
It could be an animal nobody's ever seen before, but they're there.
It's just a matter of patience in the waiting game at that point.
Yes.
All right. Hey, HelloFresh. We talked to you about it. They're sponsoring today and every day's episodes this week. And why are they doing that? It's because it's a new year. And we know that you, our listeners, you're always making new resolutions that, let's face it, you're not going to stick to. You always want to find a nicer way to live, an easier way to live, a way to change your world, and you're not going to do it. Why? Because it's too much a pain in the ass. It's hard to do. There's too much shuffling around. You get all gung-ho for it for a short time, and then when you realize all the work you have to put into it, you beg off. That's just human nature. But HelloFresh makes all of your changes and challenges so much easier. They're a meal kit delivery service that shops, plans, and delivers your favorite step-by-step recipes and pre-measured ingredients so you can just cook, eat, and enjoy. I love it. It's fantastic for me and my family. First of all, it's convenient. I can do it right from home. The selection is massive. There is something that's going to appeal to everybody in my family. And the flexibility in the selections and the accompanying bullet points that they give you on each one of them, telling you, this is what's in here. These are nut-free. This is fat-free. This is gluten-free. It breaks it down for you so you know exactly what you're getting in each one of the menu items on the program. It's absolutely fantastic. I love it. It's never made cooking any easier for me than it is right now. And you get these meals, most of them I can do in about 30 minutes. They even have one. It's a 20-minute meal on the classic menu item that you can choose, and that's for if you really are short on time. 20 minutes in and out, you're done. Most of them take no more than around 30 minutes, and there's a lot of one-pot recipes for seriously speeding cooking and minimal cleanup. And HelloFresh, they offer a wide variety of chef-curated recipes, and those change weekly. And you do get the 3 different plans to choose from: classic, veggie, and family. And with the classic, you get a variety of meat, fish, and seasonal produce. Veggies, you're going to get the vegetarian recipes and plant-based proteins, grains, and seasonal produce. And for the family like we've got, you get quick and easy meals with all the yum-worthy flavor that the whole family's going to love. Choose your delivery date when you know it's going to work best for you. And remember, you can pause your account at any time if you're going to be out of town. All the ingredients, and this is important for you, mom and dad, and aunties and uncles and grandpas and grandmas, and for those of you out on your own, all the ingredients come pre-measured in handy labeled meal kits. So you know which ingredients go with which recipe, and they deliver them right to your door in a recyclable, insulated packaging. HelloFresh, they make it so easy to cook delicious, balanced dinners, and they do it for less than $10 a meal. No more time-consuming meal planning or grocery shopping. You can enjoy not having to plan your dinner, spending money on takeout, or you could just have a nice, easy night. No worry. Pardon me. You just gather yourself up to the refrigerator, open it up, there's the kit ready for you to cook. You'll feel confident when you are cooking HelloFresh. Now, if I can survive the man flu here long enough and get through this without coughing my brains out, let me remind you to go check out HelloFresh.com. They have a special offer for our listeners. HelloFresh.com. Use keyword Darkness30. That's the code, Darkness30 at checkout to save $30 off your first week of HelloFresh. Again, for $30 off your first week of the best food you'll ever eat. I promise you, you will love this. Visit HelloFresh.com and enter Darkness 30. I love it. Tim loves it. We swear by this. And the listeners, we put out a great program for you. If you sign up now, send me a copy of your receipt and send me a picture of you with your first meal. Get them into me. By March 1st, we will do a drawing and we'll pull 2 lucky winners that will get a Darkness Radio Beyond the Darkness prize pack that'll have DVDs, movies, and other fun swag in them. So if you're interested in doing that, then sign up right now while the time is right. Get that $30 off by using Darkness30 at the checkout, and then email me the information with the photograph of you and your first meal, and we will put you into that drawing. All right, we're back. Scott Marlowe, our guest. Scott, with all of this going on, does it ever start to deflate your interest in the cryptid field? Do you ever kind of feel like, you know what, this is just, I just want out. I'm not even interested in this anymore?
Oh, no. There are times I take a break, but, and you got to do that, for your sanity, if nothing else. But, I enjoy doing the work. I really do. And, people say I'm semi-retired now because I've become disabled and I don't go out into the field as much as I used to, but I still do field work. And, if the case is interesting enough, one of the things I've been hoping for and wanting is to find an associate that I can train properly and do the work. I've had several step up and then they get full of themselves and decide they want to go for the wrong reasons. And when I realize that they're not in it for the benefit of the field, they're in it for themselves, I jettison them pretty quick. So it's not that easy, and there's not that many people out there that really want to do the science. They want the fame and fortune. So, unfortunately, that's the way it is.
Yeah, it is. Talk to me about what you've been researching and what's going on in the field right now. What's kind of the newest stuff for you?
Well, believe it or not, I mentioned the lizard man a little while ago. I got a contact through Facebook just yesterday from a person up in the Panhandle representing someone else that supposedly is having lizard man sightings up in her neighborhood that wants me to check it out. And I go up to the Panhandle pretty frequently, so I will almost certainly check it out. And I've got some friends and associates up there, one of which is a lovely lady who's a reporter for the Apalachicola Times, Lois Sloboda, and I put her in touch with the individual, and she'll look into it because she and I have worked on cryptid projects before, because she can get up there faster than I can, and I don't want to run into the problem of by the time I get up there, the animal's gone, whatever it is. So Lois will look into it and then fill me in on what she thinks, and then we'll take it from there. There's been some swamp ape sightings. There always are at this time of year that I'm looking into at the moment. And as I say, I'm working on this movie project now. We're casting, since it's going to be a reenactment kind of thing. We're casting right now, and I've got some incredible actors involved in it that will be portraying the different characters. But I'm hoping, since I don't know whether the sighting is for real or not, it's based on a true story, the script and the screenplay, which I wrote, and they've tapped me to direct it as well, thanks to the directing I've done it for Monster Quest. And hopefully this is going to show people that you can make a cryptid movie that's popular without having to resort to a hoax to do it.
And I'm sure when people take a look at it, they're going to feel, questioning your gain in this as well, because again, that's kind of what it all comes down to. There
isn't going to be any gain since it's being done through Pangea Productions, which is a non-profit. I don't get paid. The money that's made on the movie is going to go back into Pangea's pocket because it's being financed through donations to Pangea. So we can produce another movie, but after the initial cost is recouped, the actors who are portraying the roles get everything thereafter.
Well, that's a pretty good deal. How do I sign up?
Well, we got a few parts we haven't cast yet if you want to come down.
Do you have any kind of man flu encrusted wildebeest creature that's looking for love? I don't know. What? Find me a role, Scott. I'm in.
Well, we've got all kinds of crazy roles, because when I did the research on this, I found all sorts of crazy neighbors in the trailer park where these people lived. And they didn't make it into the short story in my book, Weird Monsters, that tells the story here. But in the screenplay, I put everything back because we needed all the weird subplots and everything else to make a movie. So it's going to be an interesting show. It's going to be a really interesting movie.
What is the most impressive evidence you feel that exists to prove that there are cryptid creatures among us, and not just unexplored creatures or variations of creatures we're already familiar with, but full on different creatures?
Well, forgive the shameless plug, but I wrote an article recently for Cryptid Culture magazine that deals with this subject matter, and as I said before, the skeptics versus the cynics. And one of the sidebars that I did for that article was a very long, full-page list of cryptid animals that have been discovered since the early 1900s. And you'd be surprised at how many there are.
Really? Give me a ballpark. How many do you think there have been, truthfully?
Well, I think I listed over 50. And that's just because these are bigger than a bread box.
Right.
That doesn't include the smaller creatures.
Right, but yet here we still are. There's no conclusive proof of Chupacabra or Bigfoot or the Phoenix or these Mothman, Batman creatures. Now they're being seen more and more regularly. More and more people have video cameras and are looking for these type of things. Do you think that we're getting closer to definitive?
Oh, thank God for 18
proof?
megapixel phone cameras. The photography is getting so much better, but unfortunately, so is CGI. So we still have the problem that video evidence by itself is not sufficient. But when you take video evidence and it's joined with very compelling physical evidence, now we've really got something. And that's starting to happen. People are beginning to know what to look for. The problem now is that people are not handling the materials that represent the physical evidence properly. And as a result, it's getting corrupted or tainted or otherwise rendered unusable. But that's going to go away with time, too. And, you know, we touched on that earlier with people improperly using chemical reagents and stuff like that. So, I mean, eventually those problems will go away. And when they do, of course, I probably won't be alive to see it, but when they do, you're going to start seeing a lot more of these things proven.
Scott, if people are interested in catching up with you, following what you're doing, what's the best way to do that?
The easiest way is one of my pages on Facebook. My personal page is just my name, and I don't hide. My picture's up there, so I don't hide behind any weird screen names. If you're interested in the movie project, there's a page for Phantom Flyer that you can go to, which is a fan page. It'll keep you posted on what's happening with the movie. My books, Cryptid Creatures of Florida, Bigfoot Enigma, Bigfoot in Art History, and all the others are up there with individual pages as well. Every one of them allows you to make comments. You can message me on Facebook. You can friend me on Facebook. Please, when you message me, tell me why you're doing so. I get at least 20 bimbos a day.
You are such a show-off.
I wish it was not true, but it is. I get about 20 bimbos a day trying to friend me for whatever nefarious reasons they have in mind.
Yeah, direct those right to Tim at Darkness Radio. He prefers that. Scott's a prude. If you're a bimbo, Tim will be happy to friend you. All right, Scott, you have a great rest of your night, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
You too, and feel better.
I will do my very best. Thank you. And thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back again with you tomorrow. And remember, it's True Crime Tuesday. Don't miss out on the episode. It's available right now. Incendiary. This is a creepy story. The psychiatrist, the mad bomber, and the invention of criminal profiling. Michael Cannell, our guest. Check that out. Go to darknessradio.com, click on the True Crime Tuesday banner, and subscribe now. We'll see you again tomorrow, and big thanks to HelloFresh, our sponsor for today's episode of Beyond the Darkness.